The spread of mobile technology is a vital part of the tech revolution. It also raises many questions about how the world will change as people become increasingly connected. This week, experts explored those questions at the All Things Digital Conference. It was held here in New York. Joining me now are two of the people who led the discussion. Walt Mossberg is principal technology columnist for the Wall Street Journal, and Kara Swisher, also a Wall Street Journal technology columnist. I am pleased to have them here at this table because this is the first time they have ever appeared together at the same place, right?
Well, with
on TV.
With you.
Oh, with me.
Yes.
Oh, no, you've done interviews together.
Yes,
oh, it's the first time
the first time we've ever been on a good show. Let's put it that way.
I take it. Okay, so just give me the headlines coming out of All Things.
Well, the headline is that everything is moving to mobile. If you ask companies like any social network, e-commerce companies, many of them appeared at the conference.
Right.
Small ones, big ones. The percentage of people doing their reading, their transactions, their checking with their friends on mobile versus PCs or Macs is just soaring. And I think that's the fundamental underlying headline of everything. And so phones and tablets.
Wasn't this conference dedicated to that idea?
It was dedicated to mobile, but I mean, that's why we did it, because it's moving to mobile.
Yeah. The biggest two things happening today, mobile and the cloud, I assume.
Right, exactly. And they go together.
Right,
they sort of go together. What was important, though, is not just that everybody's using this. Once consumers are using them and everyone has to follow, and if you don't have a mobile strategy, a cogent mobile strategy that actually makes money, you're in a little bit of trouble. So Facebook ran into a lot of trouble because people felt they didn't have a mobile strategy. And then you saw this incredibly aggressive effort last week to unveil Home. Which is their new mobile phone software, which I happen to have right here. And so everybody has to have a mobile answer. And even if they don't, they've got to keep saying mobile a lot of times, that we're mobile first, we're mobile native, we're doing everything around mobile. The mobile teams are integrated with our other teams because the desktop is essentially over in that regard.
Oh, okay. I mean, meaning what? People that have desktops are no longer going to use them?
No, but they don't use them. Just think about your own habits. You're sitting there with an iPad. That's a mobile device.
You have an iPad and an iPhone.
Exactly.
How many times do you sit down at your desk as much as you used to?
Well, I made more people because I'm always writing and typing.
But it's less than it was.
Yes, of course.
And that's the thing. I mean, I was at this table with you the day the iPad came out, and we talked about it. And we talked about how if the tablet could replace the laptop in enough scenarios, now it doesn't have to replace it totally, then it would take over. And we're actually seeing it before our eyes. It's not that the laptop is going to be dead, but if you use it less, then you are inclined to spend less money to replace it.
And most of new technology is poured into what's new and happening.
That's right.
Which is pervasive.
It's poured into mobile. Yeah. And Steve Jobs, at one of our D conferences in California, the last one he did,
places he spoke
before he passed away, he said, it's like cars and trucks. There was a lot of emphasis in the early days of the auto industry, according to him, on trucks for agriculture, less emphasis on cars for just people to travel, and then it flipped around. And he said the PC is the truck. It's always going to be there. It's not going to go away, but fewer and fewer people are going to rely on it fewer and fewer times during their week compared to these mobile devices.
Because they can do everything on mobile.
Not everything, but 80%.
What can't they do?
They can do, it's the Internet of Things. These things start to react with you in a physical world. You're somewhere, you use a map. When's the last time you pulled out a map or you didn't use a phone for a map in your car? Or, these are starting to become healthcare devices. I saw one at D-Mobile where it was a thing you put in your ear and it showed you a picture of the inside of your ear. So doctors use that.
It was an iPhone. It was an attachment to the iPhone.
Yeah, heart monitors. You're in a store. Google is now taking pictures of insides of stores. So it starts to become your remote control for everything in your life and interacting with the physical. And
this is because of the app explosion.
Not just the app. It could be something else, because Facebook is trying to sort of end the app explosion by this phone. But it's the idea that this mobile device can lead you everywhere and give you all kinds of hints around the world.
But Kara's right about what Facebook kind of semi-sneaky strategy is there, but it is the app explosion. There's a theological argument among technology people about apps versus web browsers. I don't think consumers care at all. They just, if there's a good game or a good productivity tool and it happens to be an app, that's what they're doing. And right now, it's apps. There's about 800,000 apps in the Apple Store, about 700,000 in the Google Store. It's enormous.
Speaking of Google, this idea is sometimes advanced. The app explosion means that people are going to use apps for search and not Google?
Well, certain search. We had Waze there, for example, which is a mapping service, and Google is a very popular mapping service. Waze has started to make inroads.
Has Apple found out?
Well, yes, Waze is the one they probably should have bought. But in terms of, there's all kinds of alternatives, and so Google, that's why they had to get in the phone business. They wanted to keep that search business, which is paying for everything, all their crazy cars and their glasses and everything else. And so they have to keep search. They have to be on the phone, being the search choice. And
even Apple, their enemy. I mean, they pay Apple, I don't know what the terms are, but there's some money that changes hands for Google to be the default search on the iPhone. Now, there are other choices. You can say I want Bing or whatever, but they're the default. On Android, there's a big Google search field right there. This Facebook phone, one of the things that I'm sure is let me just say, officially Eric Schmidt of Google came to our conference and said he's fine with this Facebook phone. But inside Google...
Was he just saying that, or does he really believe that?
I'm sure it's a little of both. They like open source, and Facebook followed their rules. But if you get immersed in Facebook, because it comes right on the minute you turn the phone on...
Explain to me right now what this phone does.
This phone is... There is no apps jump up when you open it. It is Facebook. You are in your Facebook account, so your news feed is scrolling through as you're using it. And you can immediately comment or like it or poke someone or do something. A lot of the apps are Facebook-oriented apps, like Instagram, which Facebook bought. And so your proclivity is to use Facebook apps versus... Now, the Google apps are in there, but, you know, and of course... the Facebook people say, well, it's just a few swipes away. But nobody does a few swipes away. It's hidden underneath. And it's a little bit, it feels like a little bit of MS-DOS under Windows kind of thing. Not quite that much, but you don't use Google services as much when you're in the Facebook universe.
You're not going to use Twitter either.
Exactly.
And not that you're never going to use it, but it's really about, and Zuckerberg, Mark Zuckerberg, the head of Facebook, talked about this. You have 10 minutes in the grocery store or in the Starbucks.
Right.
And you're... Normally on an Android phone or an iPhone, you would check maybe several things.
Several apps.
On this thing, the minute you turn it on, before you even unlock the phone, you're in your Facebook feed.
Yeah.
It is the same number of swipes to get to that list of apps, and you can customize it and all that. But like Kara says, you're unlikely to get there because you're just immersed in what all your Facebook friends have had to say, what the latest pictures are they've posted. And you're going to be gone with your coffee in your hand before you've ever thought, oh, I forgot to check Twitter. I forgot to check Gmail. I forgot to search something on Google.
And you might use
That's
their
what they're
messenger.
trying to do.
You use their messenger because their messenger is right there. They could put a dialer in here, which they're going to do. They're going to put a dialer. So you use their phone book to call your friends using their dialer. And, you know, they could put search in here and just very quickly. They could suddenly put Bing, and here's your search. They put a little search box there. So it's a very interesting issue of how far they're going to go.
And it's all legal under Android. And in a way, Google is a little bit being, seeing that it's a two-edged sword to be, quote, open source. Apple does not allow, and they have some integration of Facebook, and they claim to have a good relationship, but they would never allow any third-party company to take over the front of the phone.
Yeah.
Of course not.
And
Now,
we said that. We asked the Facebook people.
Well, they've been talking to
ask?
Apple.
Yeah.
But
wait, you asked them, and
we asked them, and they said, well, we hope to. And we're like, are they going to let you? And they go, we hope to. And I said, they're not going to let you.
Exactly.
They're not going to let you.
That's right.
So
we hope to meet.
We hope to. I hope to meet Santa
So the
Claus.
official position of Google is that this is all fine. It's all within the rules. We're open source. The unofficial position inside, I suspect, is not as happy.
You think the market will respond to that?
People who love
early to know.
Facebook will love this phone.
Can you tell me how all this is changing our lives? How are we different because of all this?
Well, I think shorter attention span. I think also more reliance on the technology is more personal.
Yeah.
And it goes for the tablet as well as the phone. You know yourself, because you use these things, that it's a different feeling than sitting somewhere and having that keyboard between you. Kara mentioned some of the kind of joining of the digital world and the physical world that happens on the cell phone. It's full of sensors. It can have health sensors on it.
Yeah.
It's a personal thing. And I know the PC stands for personal computer, but it's not nearly as personal as these devices.
And then the glasses, the wearable stuff starts getting interesting.
You're going to test soon the new Galaxy.
The new Samsung Galaxy S4.
Yeah. What impact do you think that'll have?
Well, Samsung has come a tremendous way. They both in the quality of their phones and in the brand, recognition that they have in the U.S. and elsewhere around the world. They're the biggest competitor to Apple right now in the phone business, and if this phone catches on,
not only that, I mean the biggest competitor to Sony in the TV business. I mean, it's just
they've driven out
pervasive across everywhere.
No one in the Android world comes close to them anymore. So whereas Google's original idea was there'd be hundreds of phone makers, and there are technically, if you count them up, who's using Android, it's hundreds of companies. Only one really has any serious market share, serious profits. It's Samsung. Which, by the way, poses an interesting problem for Google about who controls Android now. Is it Google or is it Samsung? So if this phone builds on the success of its predecessor, it just gives Samsung more power over the whole Android ecosystem.
Which would be interesting. And who has the power over that, Google or Samsung? And that does create a really interesting situation. Now, Apple has control of the entire ecosystem all the time. So it's a trade-off that Google's been making in hopes of preserving other businesses, I suspect.
So there are two questions. One, Microsoft is coming out with a smartphone.
No, they
have one.
No, they have you mean their own that they make?
Right.
Yeah.
I thought I read that. I mean, am I wrong?
I believe they will
Kara,
make.
help me out here.
They had a smartphone, and they're coming one that they make themselves. Right. Yes. Right.
We believe, but Karen and I believe they will, but
Nobody said anything about
we
this
don't
at the
know.
conference.
We don't know
Was this
enough.
not even mentioned at
We
your
had the
conference?
Microsoft phone guy there, and he mostly insulted Android. That's what he said.
No, we had a whole session with the head of Windows Phone.
Yeah.
And then, I talked to him for a while on the side. He is a smart guy. They have a good operating system. They have had almost no take-up in market share in the developed countries.
Right.
One of the things that he said was that in some countries, poorer countries, where they don't subsidize the price of the phone. Because, a Galaxy S4 or an iPhone would be, if you had to pay the full cost, would be $600.
Right.
In some of these countries in the third world, they're selling Windows phones for $50 or something.
Right.
And there they have 13, 14, 15% share instead of 1 or 2% share. And that's one of the things he said.
So he was saying, we're doing great in Mexico, Poland, and even Finland, if you can believe it. So it was kind of odd, like, oh, great, you're not winning in the U.S. They have a really difficult time, not because the phone isn't a good phone, and it is a good phone. It's because they were very late to the game, and they're certainly not making innovative strides that really jump over anybody else.
Well, they don't have enough apps.
Yeah.
Here's what goes on. You go to an app developer, even if you're willing to pay them, and Microsoft is willing to pay them.
And they got the money.
BlackBerry is willing to pay them. You go to them, and you say, make an app for our platform. And the app developer might have 5 people, might even be a big company, but the department that writes the app has 5 or 10 people. They say, we have our hands full doing Apple, which is called iOS, that's the name of their operating system, and doing Android. We don't have, and you don't have, where's your share? It's a kind of a chicken and egg game. They say, well, we'd have more share if we had more apps. And they say, well, come back when you have more share. So it's a tricky problem.
And the price of these phones here are depressed in the United States. They bring them down to the $200 level, and Microsoft can compete in markets where the phones are $600 and $700, where they are, the carrier doesn't subsidize it. Here in this country, $200 price point for this, and a Windows phone, these win. These tend to win.
Jeff Bezos at Amazon.
Yes.
Is he developing a phone?
Supposedly, we have reported that. Many people have reported that. I suspect.
I asked him, he refused to. So.
Well, of course. But did you hit him or something? No, I can't imagine he wouldn't, because it's part of the whole sort of Kindle strategy. I mean, they've already made the 2 tablets and others, many tablets.
Yeah.
And
the
it
cat
seems
tablets
like
can
a
do
phone.
more and more things. Kindle can.
What will be interesting to see is if more people do what Facebook did and create these layers on top of Android. Could Yahoo do this? Could eBay do this? I was talking to
Amazon already has done it. And they've done it in a more radical way on the tablet.
That's a full fork.
There's no Google Maps, there's no Google Search, even under several layers. It's all Amazon, and yet it's an Android tablet. So as far as I can tell, Google makes nothing when Jeff Bezos sells a Kindle Fire.
Jeff Bezos' theory, as you both know much better than I do, is He's just creating these things so he can sell content.
That's right.
That's
exactly.
all he
but
cares
that's his
about.
goal. But what if you're eBay and you could create a software layer on top of Android if you're a crazy eBay? But people who are fans, I was talking to Troy Carter, for example, who manages Lady Gaga. He has a thing called, it's Backplane, which is for fans of Lady Gaga, fans of all these artists. What if you were a crazy Lady Gaga fan and you wanted all the news? You could create a layer on top of Android, and if you were immersed in that community, you might want that. It's a very easy way to create a community.
So here's what has always been interesting to me. First of all, is the underdeveloped world, in the emerging world.
Right.
This transforms their possibilities.
Interestingly.
Their possibilities. They don't need infrastructure. They don't need any of that stuff anymore.
That's right.
Across the board.
We had people coming. We brought in people specifically. It was called Global Voices. We had a woman from Uganda who was talking about various things they were doing there. We had all kinds of people talking how they really use a phone, because I think in this country we're so elite and we're so lucky, and we play games on these things. These things transform. If you're a subsistence farmer in India, you can find the right prices.
Exactly.
If you get the right weather, if you get health information, there's all kinds of experiments.
Banking.
Microfinancing is done on
all banking.
All
I mean,
banking.
there's no bank branches in most of these places in these poor countries. They do it on the phone.
And you can find out temperature, you can find out prices, you can find out
And
climate, you can find out everything else.
You know, to be fair, let's be fair for a minute. I was talking about Google's problems. One of Apple's problems is it may need to figure out a way to make an iPhone that's cheap enough to sell into some of these lower income economies. Now, they're never going to be the lowest priced people. That's just not in their DNA. But they may have to do something a little bit less expensive.
Back to the point that I think technology is so interesting today. One, as I just said, is underdeveloped countries, and it gives them the opportunity to leap ahead and do things. Two is education.
Absolutely.
Is what the possibilities are, how you can educate and where you can get degrees. And you can sit in India and take courses at Harvard.
Right.
Yes.
There's a lot going on. I was just at
University of North Carolina.
Do you know Minerva University that Larry Summers involved in? It's a whole university.
And three, which you just mentioned, is healthcare. The possibilities of being able to understand and diagnose, and get access to information and everything else.
There's diabetes apps. There's heart apps.
There's a thing you can put on there, which is a glucose meter, like Kara was saying, which, of course, diabetics have to measure their glucose. Put the little test strip in, you measure your blood. Now, instead of being a stupid 1977 technology glucose meter, which is what they sell in the drugstore, this thing is an amazing computer. Once it gets the information in it, it can transmit it to the doctor. It can give you a beautiful graph showing how you're doing. It can send you tips. It can say, look, we've noticed that the last 4 readings haven't been so good. They've been too low or too high. We suggest you do this.
Let me ask you this. How did you two come together?
It's a long story. I was working at the Washington Post. It is interesting. I always say it's the best relationship I had with a man my whole life. It's the best marriage I've had for so long. Besides with my cell phone, which is the best relationship.
I have a great marriage.
Yes, I know you do. Yes,
no, my best relationship is with the cell phone, but otherwise. I was at the Washington Post writing a book on AOL, and Walt was the only person who was sensible to me about AOL, and I thought AOL was going to change everything because the consumers were coming to... AOL was teaching consumers to like the internet.
Well, it looked like it was going to happen, too.
Well, nobody believed in AOL. Only Walt did. Everyone was like CompuServe, Prodigy, all these other things. And Walt was the only person who said this company is going to change the face of modern computers.
This man.
Yes, and so I called him up and I wanted to interview him for my book. And that's how I met him. And then we just got along like peas
and then
and
she
carrots.
said, I don't know what I'm going to do when I get off this book leave, writing this book. Because she was working at the Washington Post. Fantastically great newspaper. We both love it. But not... at the time, the strongest newspaper in technology coverage.
Though AOL was there in a lot of early internet companies.
So I said to her, you should come to the Wall Street Journal.
Right.
And I called the editor of the Wall Street Journal, and she flew up there.
She said, good idea. Interviewed her and said, good idea.
Good idea.
And nobody was covering the internet. We didn't have any reporters. And when I got hired, one of the media reporters said to me, oh, you'll be covering CB radio, won't you? Like it's a fad. And I thought, it's not a fad. It's going to be big.
And then
it's going to be big.
A few years later.
The kids love it. The kids seem to love it. It's crazy.
A few years later, we would go to the same tech conferences, and we thought, we can do a better tech conference. Better.
Some people think that.
And so we sold it to them, and we've done pretty
sold
well.
it to them.
No, we
The
sold
idea.
the idea to the
I
Wall
thought-
Street Journal,
Yeah.
And we really wanted to do the blog,
Yeah.
first of all, but they didn't know what the word meant, actually, at the time we
Yeah.
proposed it. So that was hard when they don't
Yeah.
know what the word actually
Now, do you
means.
alternate writing the blog, or how does that
No,
work?
I run the news part, and Walt contributes his
Okay.
reviews and stuff like that.
So, how about this? Jeff Bezos, Larry Page, Amy Cook, I think, probably, and who am I missing?
Well, we've had them all.
Well, they've
Yeah.
all, everybody you just mentioned has
but
spoken at the
individual. I
conference.
want them there together.
You want them on one panel
do.
together?
Do
Yes.
you? We did have an interesting one. We did a computer.
I want them going at each other.
Right. They don't usually do that, but on a we did a computer bowl, which was history of computer history,
Yeah.
and we put Eric Schmidt on the stage with Bill Gates right when they were going at it, and they
Yeah.
were teammates,
Yeah.
which was very funny.
I once sat at a conference next to Bill as Steve was speaking. I will never forget it.
Well,
We had a bit of an incident around that.
Yeah, the year that we negotiated the joint appearance, which took less negotiating than I thought, Steve Jobs spoke separately. And during the interview, I said to him, how does it feel to have a really popular program on Windows computers, which was iTunes, very popular.
Right.
And he said to me,
Still is.
he said, it's like giving a glass of ice water to a person in hell. Now, this was about 5 hours before he's supposed to go on with Bill Gates. Bill Gates arrives at the conference. He happened not to be there at that moment. He arrives. His people brief him that Jobs has said this. He walks into the green room, the place where you hang out before you go on stage, and he is not a happy guy.
No.
He's speaking in sort of single syllables.
Right.
Jobs walks in a few minutes later. They each have their PR person.
Right.
Both PR people are very nervous. Right. And Gates says, I guess
first of all, Jobs walked in with a grin on his face, like,
yeah.
I got him.
He did.
Wasn't that good? Like, you realize these people are real people. You forget because they're so iconic. But he was like, he had his, like, I really got him
and
again.
he was late, which
Yeah.
might have been deliberate. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. And Gates said, I guess I'm the representative of hell tonight?
No, what happened was...
Is that right?
No, what happened was he was talking monosyllabically, and we were trying to explain we wanted it to be high level and not to knock each other. We wanted a big historic interview. And every time we said something, Jobs just grinned, and Gates would say, just like nothing.
And we're looking at each
We're
other
like, oh no, this is bad. And then,
But he did
something happened, and Gates said, I guess... he goes, well, what do I know? I live in hell. And Jobs...
this is all Jobs did.
Right.
As he had walked in the room, and I don't think anybody had noticed it, there was like a bucket of ice with some bottles of water.
Right.
He took a bottle of water. He was just holding it. As soon as Gates made that remark about hell, Steve Jobs handed him a bottle of ice water.
It was covered with condensation. He goes, let me help you.
It kind of broke the tension.
The ice, so to speak.
That's great.
They were always at
And it
each
went
other.
on to be a very good, it was a pretty high-level interview, actually.
Yeah, although he did get him on that one quote. At one point, he liked to get Gates all the time. And at one point I said, what's the thing about your relationship people don't know? And he goes, and Jobs sat for a second, he goes, well, Bill and I were married several years ago. And Gates was not expecting this, and he was like...
So here's my question for both of you, my last question.
Sure.
100 years from now, who are we going to remember, Bill Gates or Steve Jobs?
Oh, both.
Oh, both of them.
Both.
Both of them. But for somewhat different reasons. I mean, for one thing, with Bill Gates, you're going to remember him as a great philanthropist now, in addition to everything else he's done. But Bill Gates was utterly instrumental. Let's put it this way. Steve Jobs commercialized and popularized. He didn't invent it, but he popularized the personal computer. And then he reinvented the way you use the personal computer with the Mac, and then he did all these other devices
music,
you've shown.
and then he changed him.
But Bill Gates, without Bill Gates, he really, and Jobs himself said this at the joint interview, without Bill Gates, you wouldn't have had the PC software industry.
He's the Henry Ford of it.
Right.
He made it cheaper and more popular.
Yeah, it's like Henry Ford, Thomas Edison.
Along with Andy Grove.
Right, there's a lot of them.
Yeah, but
Jeff Bezos, Larry Page, and Sergey Brin, Steve Jobs, even Larry Ellison, and Bill Gates. These are Henry Ford, Thomas Edison.
I know, the reason I asked the question is that someone smart, and I can't remember who, and this is the reason I ask it, said to me, look, 100 years from now, they're going to remember Bill Gates more than they remember Steve Jobs. I promise you, they said, because of what he's doing in terms of civilization.
Perhaps.
Oh, well, that could be the philanthropy.
Words, the idea of how mammoth his philanthropy is and how he has gone at it with the intensity he has and how he's been absorbed by it. He's putting his stamp on the planet in a way that no individual entrepreneur
it's like Andrew Carnegie at the time.
Yeah,
if you think about it. But you know what? Do we ever forget Henry Ford and Thomas Edison? We just don't. It just it's not a choice thing. And by the way,
if you're thinking about
the Jobs story.
But if you're writing about technology, what we have now wouldn't have happened without both of them.
Right.
And it was really terrific to have them together.
Right.
And it was actually 30 years after the first really mass market PCs had come out to the year, and they both were involved in that 30 years before. So it really was an amazing moment, and you will remember them both.
And by the way, Steve Jobs' narrative is so fantastic. You couldn't make it up. You couldn't make it up, the whole thing.
Monumental.
From beginning to end.
It's so great to see you together here at this table. And
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Anytime, come back.
All right.
All right.